If you had told me 3 years ago that my decision to leave the PD and start my own business as a private detective would have me stumbling down a cold, dark alleyway in the middle of the night with a bullet in my shoulder, I would have stuck to walking the beat on a lousy salary. But sometimes in this cruel world, you never know which way you're heading, much less which way you're going to end up. In this case, I would have been better off staying in bed like my roommate Floyd is so fond of doing.
So begins a typical film noir story, with the hero limping down a dark alleyway contemplating the events that led up to his current situation. But what is film noir exactly? Film noir is not a genre of film, but rather a style based on the mood, tone, or point of view of the film. Also, the term film noir usually is referring to a certain period of film history, and the films in question were not labeled noirs at the time. Film noirs became prominent after World War II and lasted through what is termed a golden age period until about the 1960s. The term film noir was coined by French film critics who noticed the trend of how dark and bleak the style and themes of many American crime films had following the war. Film noir is a style of cinema that makes use of stylized low-key lighting, strange angles, lonely settings, and often anti-hero protagonists. The stylized lighting and angles were influenced by the German Expressionist movement. Expressionism wanted to give shape to psychological states, or different minds, through stylized visuals, and the movies used sharply exaggerated shadows, high-contrast lighting, disorienting, and skewed set design. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is more than likely the most famous early example of expressionism in the movies, using paint to make the angles and shadows the filmmakers wanted. In film noir, it's all done with lighting and camera angles.
Why is everything black and white in here?
We painted everything like an old detective movie.
What about you guys?
Detective makeup.
Floyd. Floyd.
Fucking reflex.
Floyd! It's 5 o'clock.
Oftentimes, a film noir story had a cynical and hard-hearted male character who encounters a seductive femme fatale.
My instincts told me this dame was nothing but trouble. But trouble is my middle name. Well, not really. My middle name is Trumbull.
Femme fatales are the sirens in these types of movies, seducing men and using them for their usually dark motives, and the main character is usually their prey. More often than not, the femme fatale would use her womanly wiles to take advantage of or manipulate the main character. After this has taken place, the femme fatale is usually taken down as well, either with a bullet or being taken off to the slammer as some examples. Going back to the hero, or anti-hero, depending on what film you watch, they are usually depicted as conflicted, hard-boiled detectives, cops, gangsters, lone wolf private eyes, killers, war veterans, or just your average Joe, struggling to survive, and more often than not, they lose.
I don't want to set the world on fire. I just want to start a flame in your heart. In my heart I have but one desire.
Thematically, film noir films showed the dark side of human nature not only in its twisted storytelling or characters, but through the use of distortion. Reflections in windows, mirrors, and contorted and elongated shadows, deep focus photography, and juxtaposition, skewed camera angles that were usually diagonal or vertical, and unbalanced compositions are all used to set an oppressive atmosphere that loomed over the characters.
Want to start a flame in your heart.
But the end never came! At least not then. Quite suddenly, the barrage stopped, and the sudden silence afterwards was punctuated by a couple of strange gurgles and whines. The four stared at each other. What happened, sister? They stopped. They stopped. They stopped!
I beg your pardon, sir.
Exteriors were, more often than not, urban night scenes using dark alleyways and gloomy appearances. The image of lonely streets and a lone figure walking down them really brings home the idea of separation or even isolation.
Are you sure you don't want the guide?
No, thanks.
Then get out of my sight. Get out of my sight. Where was I? I'll just start here. His house was still there, but how or why, he had no idea. But he had decided to do.
Interiors were often more moody, utilizing dimly lit apartment or hotel rooms of the big city, desolated warehouses, and maybe even decayed and forgotten mansions. And don't forget the small rooms that are filled with cigar or cigarette smoke circling the characters' heads.
Cigar. I can't stand the smell of it.
I see.
Going back to the topic of odd angles, Norse cinematographers favored low angles for several reasons. Firstly, this angle made the characters rise from the ground in an almost expressionistic manner, giving them dramatic girth and symbolic overtones. In addition, it also allowed the viewer to see the ceilings of the interior settings, creating even more of a sense of claustrophobia and paranoia, appropriate emotions for the world of Noir. High angles could also produce disequilibrium, peering down a stairwell, over a flimsy railing, or out of a skyscraper window at a city street far below. Okay, well, I think that wraps it up. Thank you for watching the movie, and I hope you enjoyed it.
But you failed.